Hey internets, this is just going to be a quick rant about the problem with the word creepy and how it gets misused to kind of ruin not just the dating scene, but in-person face-to-face interactions in general. And how the problem of this word shows why modern society needs to start normalizing the assumption that non-specific, ambiguous accusations are probably nonsense until proven otherwise. Or at the very least, the default position should be to not take them seriously. This is a topic I was going to originally include in my video on the male loneliness crisis, and while it is definitely related to that, I realized it'd be better off just as its own standalone video. Also, I don't do sponsors for my short videos, but I occasionally put something on my merch store on sale, and in this case, the Retro Gamers merch is still on sale. It's one of my better designs in my opinion, and all profits do directly help me towards making my content. So that'll be in the description below, or you can use this QR code. Thanks very much for your support. Anyways, the basic issue comes down to what specifically creepiness is. Its definition is that it's causing an unpleasant feeling of fear or unease. And while there's nothing wrong with that on its face, and there are legitimate uses of the word creepy, the issue here is that it is a subjective concept. Anybody can claim that they feel unease from somebody or something, and it's ultimately unfalsifiable. You can legitimately just walk up to someone, point at them, and say, "You are creepy," and there is absolutely nothing they can do to prove that their presence or something about them somehow is causing you to have an attack of the feels. And in many ways, it's the same fallacy of people who just claim to be offended and then get flabbergasted when the people around them don't take them seriously. It all comes from a standpoint of a very entitled and very hypocritical mindset, where one expects people around them to take their feelings seriously, but not the feelings of others. Specifically, not the feelings of the person they're accusing, which ordinarily wouldn't really be that big of a problem so long as people didn't take it seriously. And of course, the issue here is that people do take this seriously, which is kind of weird because a lot of people, at least most people it seems, have learned not to take the whole "I'm offended" seriously, but people still fall for it when it's reworded as an accusation of being creepy, even though the reasoning behind it is essentially the exact same subjectivist nonsense, especially in the dating scene. And so a very common thing that happens is that a woman will just kind of accuse a man of being creepy, and everybody in the room just kind of immediately sympathizes with her and assumes that he must have done something wrong, even if she hasn't actually specified anything. So it can very quickly spiral into this Kafka-esque social interaction where someone finds themselves of being accused of something, and everybody around them assumes that accusation is true, but absolutely nobody knows what the accusation actually is. And in some cases, honestly even more insane cases where there is a specific accusation, sometimes the word creepy will get used as the only evidence for that accusation. Like this right here, a man spends 31 days behind bars for a false grapes accusation, and the only evidence that he actually did anything, as well as the only motive that she had for making this false accusation, was that he was just quote-unquote lay creepy. And that was it. He was creepy, therefore he was guilty. 1 month in the slammer. And so one thing that particularly happens in either the dating scene or the bar scene that has been debated on the internet extensively is of course the devil effect and the halo effect, where people are more or less likely to be accused of being creepy, not based on any kind of objective behavior, but instead based entirely on how attractive they are or their perceived social value. For instance, in the basic context of a man asking a woman out on a date, as shown in this discussion right here on Purple Pill Debate. Some women tend to frame a failed approach as a moral failing on the guy's part that goes beyond a simple no thanks, but implies that he is effed up, socially, simply for the horrible crime of expressing interest, with a particularly good reply to this being, ugly is creepy. I've been fat and ugly and ripped and not ugly, and women treated me completely differently when I wasn't fat and ugly, even though I wasn't doing anything differently. And I've noticed I do the same thing myself. When an attractive girl checks me out, it's nice. Feels flattering, but when a fat girl checks me out, my instant reaction is to feel grossed out. And of course, there are many people who try to deny that creepiness oftentimes simply just means ugly in the context of the dating scene, but there's a pretty good amount of data that proves that this is definitely a thing, which is kind of surprising actually that we have academic research that proves that the ugly is creepy camp is correct, because ordinarily when something goes against political correctness, it tends to not really get much funding, or a lot of the times universities won't even want to look into it, so the study just kind of never gets done. And so when you see cases like this where you have research that goes against what you would normally expect from what you could call the cathedral, then you know it's almost certainly true, because in our current cultural climate, the politically correct thing to do is, of course, listen and believe. Because the issue here at its root actually has absolutely really nothing to do with the dating market at all, but rather what we're seeing is more of a major flaw in social interaction that kind of evolved over time as cultures around the world shifted from valuing honor and respect more to valuing victimhood. The whole dichotomy of people either being oppressors or victims, which has the unfortunate side effect of creating an avenue for a disingenuous individual to try and gain social clout by simply essentially painting themselves as the victim. And this has widespread consequences for social interaction as a whole, because this overvaluing of the victim status has put us into a situation where we're kind of expected to magically know what other people are feeling, which makes social interactions very awkward. Everybody's walking around in a social situation with different rules and arbitrary ideas in their heads of how that social interaction should go, and a lot of people are just kind of assuming that everybody else knows or believes the same things that they know or believes on how those interactions should go. Ordinarily, this would not be an issue if we were living in a society where people still had some actual backbone and some thick skin. Because when people know not to get offended when someone steps over a boundary that they couldn't have possibly known was even there, then you can simply set the boundary audibly so that they know, and then it's not a big issue. The problem was we've kind of entered a low consciousness society where people again expect this kind of magic knowledge and are willing to completely freak out, or pretend to freak out just for the sake of getting victim points. And the result is that a lot of social interaction sucks these days, which can actually further incentivize people to just not bother with social interaction, or to just not play the game entirely. For example, back in college, and I'm actually older than people think I am, so this was 20 years ago, I recall this one time where there was a girl in one of my classes where we weren't close friends or anything, we were associates, we relatively got along, and apparently she had this massive crush on me, and yet she just didn't tell me. In fact, she dropped no hints whatsoever, or if she did, they weren't very good ones. But of course, I had my suspicions, but I decided to just not really bother. My mindset was just sort of, whatever. But part of the reason I didn't really go for it is simply because if you aren't absolutely sure of something like that, even back then in the early 2000s, social interactions were such that you could just make a fool of yourself if you were wrong. And the result of this is that later, out of the blue, she just started hating me one day because she wanted me to ask her out and I didn't, and she got all pissy about it. So perhaps I dodged a bullet. The point here is that this kind of state of taking unfalsifiable social accusations seriously has kind of resulted in this mind-reading paradox, where if you ask her out and you're wrong, you're a creeper, and if you don't ask her out and you're wrong, then you're a jerk. And so that's another issue. People kind of want to have it both ways. But another really big issue is how this causes problems with normal interactions that don't have anything to do with dating. I sometimes see the word creepy propping up in political discussions, usually as an accusation from the party that is losing the argument. And a really good example that I can use to wrap this video up to showcase what's really going on here is actually around the drama of the game I'm playing in the background right now. The Pragmata drama, where all men who want to play this game are just lay creepy, because they just are. They've made the accusation that men who want to play Pragmata are lay creepy, and therefore they have done something wrong. A particularly silly one is the drama between Hasanabi and Shuanhead right now. Yep, that's right, some good old-fashioned leftist infighting. Oh, it's so creepy, and Shuanhead just kind of being strangely the voice of reason on this, explaining why that's kinda dumb. Which honestly isn't a difficult thing for her to do, because what Hasanabi had to say is a very easy argument to refute. It's very, very dumb. All it is just interpreting something in the most bad faith way you possibly can, and then spinning that into an ambiguous accusation about social status, and that's it. That's the argument. Which is partially why I'm making this video. It's sad to see that people still, in the year 2026, still have not figured out the trick behind this unfalsifiable accusation and why it's not a good argument. People are just kind of throwing this subjective, ambiguous nonsense around, and they sincerely believe, they sincerely expect that what they're saying should be taken seriously, which is of course completely ridiculous because they're not actually saying anything. And the particular instance of the pragmatic drama saying that men are creepy for wanting to play a game that basically brings out the fatherhood instinct by having you look after this little android girl, it kind of shows how a lot of people really have some bizarre insecurities, and that they're basically just projecting those insecurities. They don't actually have a real argument. In fact, they've very much lost this argument, which actually gives us a hint of how we should be dealing with this, because the fortunate thing, the good news about this, is that the whole creepy word being used to spew ambiguous accusations, there's actually a very easy way that you can deal with it, even as an individual. And it goes back to something I said earlier. You see, back in the 1800s and early 1900s, we didn't have this victimhood culture. Rather, we had more of a culture about honor and respect. And so back then, when someone tried to throw an ambiguous accusation at somebody, you didn't really see the whole issue of a pathetic soy simp going, "Oh no, I must have done something to offend Her Majesty." No, they would do the exact opposite. They would look their false accuser straight in the eye and ask them if they're disrespecting them. Or in other words, they just simply refused to put up with bullshit and would immediately call it out for what it is. And so people didn't really try to use ambiguous accusations back then because it risked immediate backlash. And that's exactly the strategy you can take. As a final example, I'd recently dealt with one of these little Pop-Tarts myself on Zitter. I posted "Decades of Anti-Natalist Propaganda Destroyed," with a little video of Diana falling down a slide. Now, of course, any normal person views this as cute, because it is. But to the misandrist, it's creepy. And so what do? Simple. Call out the false accusation for what it is. And that's really it. There's no need to take these twats seriously. There's no need to ask them, oh, what did I do to offend you? There's no need to do that. If someone disrespects you with some ambiguous bullocks, then, well, there's an age-old saying, claims presented without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Someone too cowardly to specify their accusation should be assumed to be lying until proven otherwise. And that's how we should really be treating people who pull this crap, because it is exactly the same childish much ado about nothing as people believing that their state of being offended should be taken seriously. It's just that that has gone out of style, and so now these people are just using the word creepy to try and push the exact same entitled mindset. And so that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And to help support the continuation of my content, you can either tip me on Ko-Fi, subscribe to me on Subscribestar, or become a member of the channel. Or of course, if you want some cool swag in return, you can check out my merch store, of which my Retro Gamer merch is currently on sale, and you can get to it with this QR code. But anyways, for now, that is all. Thanks for watching. Till next time.